Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Dr. Matthew Zakreski, popularly known as Dr. Matt. He is a high energy, creative clinical psychologist and professional speaker and author, a professor and a researcher. Welcome to the show, Dr. Matt.
Thanks for having me. Your energy is spectacular. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's do the thing.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. Thank you. Thank you. And sorry for the slip of tongue. Sometimes, not it is sometimes, you go in a flow, you try to do it, but every time I'm not successful. I am still learning about a lot of things. As for energy, you see, you are a high energy, creative, clinical psychologist yourself. So I cannot be the only one here. So you are there. I'm very happy, in fact, so my brain is passing me that energy so that, we can create some more energy for people to understand. And so I'm sure a lot of people today will learn a lot of things about our brain, and we'll be talking in that backdrop. So, Dr. Matt, I want to understand the brain a bit. You talk about it. Perfectionism, imposter syndrome, neurodivergence. We'll come to know. We'll talk about that. First, I want to know about the brain. Why is it that when we talk of imposter syndrome, a person who studies hard, is low on confidence, but still studies hard and is able to achieve everything that he or she wants, and he is full of confidence that he will achieve that success. But once you achieve that success, you get imposter syndrome. Does your brain sleep at that point in time and then it suddenly wakes up? If it sleeps, how do you get that success? I want to understand not just about the imposter syndrome, but the way our brain functions. What is this brain? You know about it. Tell us about it a bit more so that we can understand ourselves and our brain.
Well, that's what I'm here to help you do. So imposter syndrome is best understood as an anxiety disorder, right? So you achieve something, you get something done, but because your brain knows the process you took to get there, all the shortcuts, all the sleepless nights, all the struggles and self-doubt, when you finish the thing, when you get that promotion, when you turn in the paper, when you are on the podcast, right? Your brain goes, oh gosh, well, I didn't do these things and I did do these things that were bad. So I don't actually deserve to be here. Because that thought has taken root, when you get praise or reward for doing a job well done, your body pushes it away. It says, no, I don't deserve it. So instead of feeling good that you got the thing, you feel relieved. That's the single biggest marker of imposter syndrome, is that when a good thing happens to you, do you feel like, oh, right, that was awesome? Or do you feel like, oh, thank God I survived? Because if you feel, thank God I survived, then we want to stop and really reinforce the thing that you got and the thing that happened. Because our brains run on dopamine. So when a good thing happens, our brain gives us the dopamine. But if we're not getting the dopamine, right, because our brain isn't giving us credit for finishing the thing, then we are just sitting in negative feelings. And we're like, oh gosh, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I wasn't that good to begin with. And it forces you to work harder, right? But then you end up on what I like to call the hamster wheel of doom, because it's just running faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster until you burn out, which then proves to you that you were an imposter, because imposters don't fail, right? So that's imposter syndrome, unfortunately, in a nutshell. But it's a real challenge.
Right, right. Let's understand a bit more about the brain. You are an expert on this, so let's understand who controls the brain. We know about that the brain controls most of our bodies, the way we think, the way we do things. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's the basic understanding. Correct me if anywhere I am wrong.
Yeah.
But one thing, yeah. If you want to interrupt, then I'll come to the question. One, carry on.
No, after you, please.
Right. So, if brain controls everything, then many a times it is that we come to feel that hurt about heartache, heartbreak immediately, and the brain tells us. But
Mhm.
when there's heart attack, many a times we don't know. Why is it that the brain is so fast in telling us about things which matter, but something which matter bigger, it is slow in telling about that? It is supposed to protect us. How does that work? Help us understand this part of our functioning.
So our brain's number one job is to keep us safe, right? That's the brain's job. And so when you find yourself in moments like this, the brain is working extra hard to keep you safe. The brain's like, "Hey, are there any dangers? Are there any threats? What's in my environment?" And the perception of those things as threats matters a lot more than if they're actually threats in the first place. So, and anxiety is not a bad thing, right? Anxiety is evolutionary. It's kept us alive, but we need to put appropriate limits around it, right? There's a big difference between it's dark outside, I'm going to look around before I walk to my car. That's appropriate anxiety versus I can't leave the building and walk across the dark parking lot to my car because what if something bad happens to me? Then that's when the anxiety's got its hands on the steering wheel and it's running the show. So now it would be easy, of course, if we could snap our fingers and not have anxiety, but anxiety doesn't work that way. So what it is having a relationship with those feelings, really paying attention to that part of the brain and understanding like, okay, my brain is trying to keep me safe. What are the strategies I have that will keep me safe in a world that may not be safe? Right? And is that physical? Is that mental? Is that psychological? Is that social? Right? Can you walk to your car with a buddy? There you go. It's a simple solution, right? The whole idea of anxiety is that it becomes less adaptive when it shifts from things that are reasonable and predictable to things that are impossible or catastrophic, right? Like, if I go on a podcast, I might do a good job, I might not do a good job, but it's largely going to be okay. Versus the anxiety part of my brain's like, what if you go on there and you make such an idiot out of yourself that no one ever wants to hire you as a speaker ever again in your entire life? And I'm like, I mean, I guess theoretically that's possible, but it's not likely. I'm good at my job and you're a good podcast host. And, I'm not going to just start screaming random strings of words at you, I don't think. So, so when our anxiety starts ramping up, it's all about what if. A good way to get out of that loop is to shift from what if to what is, right? What is in front of me right now? What is the thing I can do? What is the reality of the situation? You can't solve problems until you arrive at them. So your brain's like, well, what if this bad thing happens? Well, if it happens, then we will deal with it when we get there. That's all we can do.
Right, right, Dr. Matt. Now, if the job of the brain is to keep us safe, then why is it that we get addicted to things which we should not be? For example, social media,
Yeah.
doom scrolling.
Doom
You
scroll.
know,
Oh, yes.
that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
We are doing it. The brain feels, some happy because then we are, and the brain is supporting it. How does that happen? I want to understand this part of the survival function of our brains.
Okay. Um, so addiction is an interesting concept, right? Because no one seeks to get addicted. But there are things that are built to be more pleasurable to our brain and thus have a higher rate of addiction, right? I often joke with my clients like, no one ever gets addicted to celery. Celery is food. Yeah, you eat the celery, you put food in your system, you move on with your life. But celery doesn't really move the needle in our brains. It doesn't release a lot of dopamine, doesn't release a lot of norepinephrine. So it's a fairly neutral experience. But eating a double bacon cheeseburger or eating a piece of chocolate lava cake, those are things that are dopamine bombs for our brain. Our brains like those experiences, so they seek out more of them. And so things like alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, opiates are literally wired to hit those pleasure centers of our brain. And so our brain goes, more of that. I like that thing, more of that, do the thing, do the thing. And because our bodies try really hard to be efficient, right? Because, an efficient use of energy is a productive system. They like things that are a lot of dopamine for not a lot of work. There's a reason fast food exists in America, right? It's a lot of dopamine and a lot of calories for minimal effort. All you have to do is give them some money and they give you the food, right? You could make a much better tasting cheeseburger and french fries and milkshake at home, but it's going to cost more money, it's going to take more effort, right? So that's the trade-off our bodies and our brains make. And addiction is a lot of dopamine for very, very, very little effort, right? How hard is it to get a beer? How hard is it to get a cigarette, right? It's not hard. Let's take that even a step further, because the things that our bodies are trained to do, the reinforcement patterns come across as reinforcement or punishment. Reinforcement means we want the behavior to happen more. Punishment means we want it to happen less. So the thing with addiction is that it's reinforced in two different directions. It's doubly reinforced. It's reinforced positively. We're adding something to the situation because I feel good. I have a glass of wine. I feel good. I'm like, yeah, wine is great. But it also negatively reinforces it. Negative means I take something aversive away so the behavior continues. So if you're anxious, a glass of wine might make you less anxious, right? So you're feeling better and you're feeling less anxious. That's a double barrel reinforcement there, right? If you get addicted, a lot of people get addicted to opiates because of chronic pain. Opiates take the pain away and they make you feel kind of high and like loose and happy. So once again, double reinforcement. So you plug those behavioral patterns in with the neurobiology of it, with these dopamine centers and the pleasure centers of our brain. I mean, it's a cocktail that's very difficult to step outside of. And social media is a very similar thing, right? Because it's giving us exposure to a lot of things, many of which are pleasurable, and almost all of them are exciting, right? You're either excited because it like made you really happy or excited because it really pissed you off, right? But you keep scrolling because there's the next dopamine hit. It's just one flick of the thumb away. And if you're not careful, it's like, have you ever seen somebody at a slot machine, right? They just keep cranking the thing over and over. Doom scrolling is a similar behavioral pattern because your brain is going, the next one is going to give me the thing. The next one is going to give me the thing. The next one. And when that thing finally hits, then your brain goes, oh, that felt great. Let's do another one. Right? That's what, and social media is literally designed to do that. It's literally designed to keep us engaged, activated, and scrolling for the next dopamine hit because our brains are fairly straightforward like that. If you build a system for it, I mean, there's a reason there are casinos all over the world, right?
Right, Dr. Matt. So if the brain takes care of us, how do we take care of our brain best? You talked about doom scrolling.
Yeah.
What are the other things that we can do in our day-to-day life so that we make our brain much more, important, much more functional for us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm going to say therapy. Right? It's a surprise. The psychologist thinks you should go to therapy. But therapy is not for everybody, and it's not a thing that everyone can access. So go to therapy if you can. I would highly recommend it. Send me an email. I'll send you some referrals. Additionally, there's a neuropsychologist named James Arden, and he came up with a protocol that I think works brilliantly for a lot of people. It's one of the things that's therapeutic without being therapy. And it's an acronym is SEEDS, SEEDS. And it stands for the 5 things you can do to protect your brain outside of therapy. So it's socializing, being around people who love us and we feel good about. Exercise, moving your body makes your brain feel better. Education, learning something. And learning something doesn't have to mean you go to school or take a class. It could be reading a book or listening to a podcast or watching a documentary or doing a Sudoku in the morning, right? Just your brain's a muscle, work it out, right? Then the fourth one is D for diet. Healthy food is a great investment in your brain and body. And I mean, listen, I love a cookie. I love a craft beer, right? You don't have to be a monk, right? The idea is try and take, when you look at everything you eat, try and take one processed food and replace it with one natural food, right? So if you replace pretzels with a banana, it's a step in the right direction, right? You don't have to go from double bacon cheeseburgers and milkshakes to quinoa salad. But if you get a double bacon cheeseburger, maybe get a salad as your side instead of french fries. It's a simple step, right? Fewer trans fats, healthier brain, healthier body. And then the last S is sleep. Now, sleep, I think, is it's the hidden trick. It's the secret system in mental health. Most people do not sleep well. Most people have poor sleep hygiene, and we could do an entire podcast on sleep hygiene. But just to hit the key points, right? The first point is that have a sleep routine. If you're going to bed at 2 in the morning, then make sure you're doing the same thing every day when you go to bed at 2 in the morning, right? So you go upstairs, you change your bed clothes, you brush your teeth, you get into bed, you read your book, you go to sleep. Now, your bed should only be used for two things: sleeping and sex. And that's really it. Like, so if you're a teen out there listening to this, you're like, I do my homework on your bed. Try not to, because you want to associate that space with only the things you do in bed. Primarily for this talk, we're talking about sleep. So when I put my head on the pillow and I lay my body on the bed, my body knows, okay, it's time to go to sleep. It's time to start releasing those chemicals in our brains that calm us down. You want to try and have no screen time for about an hour before you go to sleep. That's really hard to do, right? So don't think that as like it's an hour or I failed. It's like put your phone away when you brush your teeth. If that's 15 minutes, that's better than 0 minutes, right? And then maybe you put your phone away when you go upstairs to change your clothes, and that's a half hour, right? Every step you take is a little bit healthier, a little bit better. And if you're like me and you wake up at 3 in the morning and your brain is racing, those are all fine things. What you can do is, if you're laying there in the bed and you're not able to get to sleep, this is an opportunity to lose the battle to win the war. Get up out of bed, find a newspaper, a magazine, a book, something to read somewhere else in the house, a comfortable chair. Read for like 20, 30 minutes. That's about as long as a sleep cycle takes in our body. What you're going to find is your body starts to fall asleep again, starts to get sleepy. And after about 30 minutes, you get back, go back to bed, try again. Now, people are like, why would I leave my bed if I'm trying to go to sleep? Well, laying in bed and trying to sleep is a demand task. Demands are stressful to our body. It's like telling someone to relax or telling somebody to be spontaneous. It's counterindicated. So if you're like laying there in bed and you're like, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I'm trying to sleep, I'm trying to sleep, you need to sleep, you need to sleep. That's a very human thing to do. But now you're attaching stress to this place you're supposed to be calm. So get up out of bed, go sit in a place where you can read a book or a magazine for like 20, 30 minutes, and then go back to sleep. What you're going to find is you're going to fall asleep a lot faster and stay asleep a lot later. So SEEDS, seeds, how we take care of our brains if you're not going to therapy.
Right, right. Wonderfully explained, Dr. Matt. Now
Thank
let's
you.
come to your expert area of expertise. You are one of the world's top experts in neurodivergence, and you also have as you say, eclectic approach to meet the specific needs of your neurodivergent clients. Help us understand this special part of the brain. Some are neurodivergent, some are, and there is a whole lot of you know. People involved into it. Either is giftedness, ADHD, dyslexia, autism. Help us understand. When we say neurodivergence, people do not, everyone does not understand this word. Even I had to Google it earlier, than I forgot. Again, I Googled it today to find out so that I can understand it a bit while the discussion. Help us understand neurodivergence in simple words so that we understand it better. And what is your approach towards this so that people who come across such people, they understand it better and that there is a better communication between them as such.
So the best way to understand neurodivergence is that about 70% of people are neurotypical, right? So their brains largely function the way that brains should. They think and feel and act more or less like society would expect us to. But neurodivergent brains, like we talked about, autism, ADHD, giftedness, dyslexia, dyspraxia, are show up in the world as different behaviors, different ways of thinking, different ways of feeling, different ways of socializing. And for a long time, we assumed those differences were characterological. So Johnny doesn't pay attention because Johnny's a bad kid. Not that Johnny's prefrontal cortex, which his job is to help him pay attention, isn't working as well as it should, right? So it's so important to understand neurodivergence in terms of the source of the things we see in the world, because then it gives us an anchor point to have the conversations about. It's like your brain is doing a thing. The thing is not better or worse than other things, but it is different than we expect. So we're going to adapt your environment to meet the different needs of your brain. You know, you commented on my books earlier, right? And they're awesome. They're very pretty. They're organized by color, but I can't see that because I'm colorblind. So that's a neurodivergence for me. My optic nerve and my rods and cones don't work like they're supposed to. I can't see color differences. So I acknowledge that these books are very pretty. I can't really see how nice they are, but there's a reason my wife organized these for me, because if you asked me to do it, they would be a mess, right? Because I wouldn't be able to organize them by color. So that's a way we adapt the environment. So if you're ADHD and you're at work, we can adapt your workplace to make it more tolerable for a person with ADHD. If you're a gifted student, we want to change how you're being educated to give you more challenging stuff faster, right? If you're dyslexic, we want to put in systems that make accessing readable material easier for you. And when we start thinking about it as meeting a need, not fixing a person, the conversation shifts in a really important way. And I think when people feel better, they do better.
Right, Dr. Matt. So, why do we look at it differently then? Like, for example, a lot of people have their own issues like imposter syndrome, perfectionism. If we look at it from a different angle, we might find it as some sort of a good thing in certain situations, some situations not a great thing, because then that keeps on taking the work forward and forward, and it never gets over because you want it to be perfect. Okay, as a doctor in surgery, it has to be perfect, but in terms of writing a couple of paragraphs, one does not have to make it so perfect and keep on waiting. So help us understand then, why do people pay special attention only to neurodivergence, in somewhat looking at it differently, and not towards these things? And also, if people look at it some sort of a mental deficiency, in some cases, then why do other people all suffer much more mental discomfort than this section of people? And I guess a lot of these people come to you for therapy and all those mental needs. How does that work? I want to understand these two sections of our mind, which impacts two different sections differently. Help us understand this particular aspect.
So I think probably the best way to think about it is that everybody's brain is different, right? And our brains are the sum total of our biology, but also our life experiences, right? So this is nature and nurture. And one of the most harmful things we can do to somebody is to expect them to be what we think they should be. Right? I always tell my clients, like, the only word I don't want you to use in session is the word should. I should have this under control. I should be better, smarter, cooler, skinnier, whatever that might be, right? Because should gives you blame for a thing you don't have or aren't doing. And life is hard enough. We don't need, we don't need that. So a good way to think about that is all you can do is meet yourself where you are, right? So if you weigh 400 pounds and you want to lose weight, well, then we're going to start trying to get you from 400 pounds to 398 pounds, right? And you might say, well, like I should be skinnier. Probably. Doesn't matter though. Like all you can do is start where you are. So want our brains seek change, but they seek the least onerous way to get there. And sometimes that means we're at cross purposes, right? So it's our brains like, I want to be skinny and attractive, but I don't want to go to the gym because the gym is hard. So I'm not going to do that. And this is the psychological term is ambivalence, right? Where you've got two competing goals. Like I want to relax, but I also want to do this thing. So when we're stuck, we often are feeling ambivalent, right? I want to get a better job, but I'm afraid to put myself out there. I want to go to university, but I don't know. I'm worried I can't afford it, right? Those competing things keep us stuck, right? Because it's pulling us in the opposite directions. So what we do in those moments is we acknowledge, like, yeah, right? These feelings come down to these are complicated things. But if it was up to me and there was no limits on what I could do, what would I choose? And most people say, well, if it was up to me and there were no limits, I would go to university. Okay, then we're going to act like you want to go to university and we will solve the problems that come up in that process as we go. Right? That's moving from what if to what is. Because what if I can't afford it? Well, shoot, man. You won't know you can afford it until you actually apply to university and see what they can pay for you. So, so it's like our brains are trying to protect us. Our brains are trying to help us navigate the world. But the biggest gift we can give to ourselves is this idea of I am where I am. Whatever changes I want to make are going to best come from understanding this is just where I'm at, right? Think of it as like a big, tall staircase. You want to be at the top of the stairs, and being at the bottom is unpleasant. But every step you take is a little bit closer to your goal. That's a way to make your brains work for you, not against you.
Right, right. Wonderfully explained, Dr. Mac. Now let's look at, happiness and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who have no challenges, they continue to struggle with happiness.
Yeah.
Sometimes to the point of asking whether they are happy or not happy. On the other hand, a lot of people who have many challenges, but if you ask them or see them, they are happy, they are smiling. Why is it that in some cases we create, artificial challenges in our mind? And in so many cases, when there are real challenges, we still are able to create happy moments, happy situations, smiling faces. How does that work? How should we look at these two aspects in our lives?
So happiness is an interesting thing. And there's a great book on this called The Happiness Trap, which I would highly recommend that you read. But the biggest thing here is that happiness is not the goal of life. If you try to be happy, you're going to actually make yourself more miserable, because happy is like any other emotion. It ebbs and flows, right? So the idea of life is to be regulated. It's like to be adapted to the situation you're in. So if it's appropriate to be sad, you're sad. If it's appropriate to be angry, you're angry. If you're appropriate to be happy, you're happy. And if nothing else is going on, you can calm down and just sort of relax. So happiness does better. It impacts us more if we treat it as a thing that happens rather than where I want to be, because then that adds stress to the goal of happiness. Like if you think about your life, your sort of standard day, not everything in your day makes you happy, because nobody's life works that way. That doesn't mean your day's miserable. It just means that most of the things that happen are kind of neutral, right? Like, I had a cereal bar for breakfast. It didn't make my day. I wasn't like screaming in joy. It was a pretty good cereal bar. And then I moved on to the rest of my day, right? This is something I look forward to. This is something I'm taking joy from, right? But I know that when we wrap up this podcast, I will be happy for the thing I did, but I also know that experience is going to end, right? Because all experiences end. So the biggest way to maximize the impact of your happiness is to treat it as a thing that happened to you, not where I want to be. If you can see it that way, I think the happiness you have in your life, whether it's from what you do, how you feel, who you're with, will impact you a lot more.
Right, right, Dr. Matt. One last question about the brain. You talk about, our brains and the manifestation that it can create of things in the world. How does that work? You mean the way we think the world will become like that? How does that work about the manifestation part and the brain?
Okay. So if we think about manifestation, right? Our brains like to have a target, likes to have a finish line or a goal. So if you do things like, I want to sleep better.
Okay.
Okay, what does that mean? Right? Is that 5 minutes a day? Is that quality of sleep? Is that quantity of sleep? Is that who you're sleeping with? I don't know, right? So our brains do better when they have a target, when they have a goal, something to. So it's not I want to lose weight, it's I want to lose 21 pounds. It's not I want to go to university, it's I want to go to this university. Right? I don't want to make more money. I want to get this kind of job. Like the more concrete you can be, the more your brain anchors onto the specific things we need to do to get that thing. And then you're going to find that you're much more targeted in your behavior and your goals. People come to me with these very like sort of wide reaching goals. Like I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. I want to have a better life. Those are great idealistic things to do, but it's hard to make them goals because they don't lend themselves to concrete thinking. So I want to have a better life. Great. What does that mean for you? I want to spend more time with my kids. That's a thing we can concretize. That's a goal we can make. I want to eat better. What does that mean? I want to eat more fruit, more vegetables, and less pizza. Okay, we're going to set goals around those 3 things. So manifesting really to me is being specific in what you want and going after it.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's a lot of great information, insights you have shared about our own brains. But there is for those people who want to understand more about it, want to connect with you in terms of neurodivergence and any other services that we offer, what is the best way for them to connect with you, Dr. Matt?
So the best way to connect with me is to contact me via my website, the neurodiversitycollective.com. I also have a website for my speaking and corporate training. That's drmattzakreski.com. But yeah, I mean, if you find me on the web, then we can have a chat and figure out what the best way for me to help you meet your needs are, because me and my team are really well positioned to help a lot of people with navigating the world.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.